What's up, people? I'm Shaggy, the Opinionated Hippie, continuing my deep dive into Frank Zappa's Everything He's Ever Done Live. That's available out there to listen to. Still have blepharitis. This eye's a little red this morning. Usually worse in the morning, but I don't feel like wearing sunglasses. I hope it's not that bad. I apologize if it is. But today we got 11/26/74 as we near the end of the Summer Fall 74 tour. My favorite tour, my favorite band. Though this isn't the actual version of my favorite band, because several days ago in 1974 time, Tom Fowler, the bass player, broke his hand. Mike Urso took Tom Fowler's place for one show, the previous review I did. Then there's another show that a set list exists for. 23rd was the Urso show. There is a set list for the 24th that's out there. I've never heard a tape. I've never seen a tape. I know nothing about a tape. I believe Urso was the bass player for that one too, because in this one, 11/26, James Birdlegs Humans is playing the bass. He would appear on a number of Frank Zappa actual studio songs. He's on the studio Redunzel. He's on my least favorite One Size Fits All song and one of my least favorite Zappa songs, Can't Afford No Shoes. He most famously gets his finger stuck when playing Sleep Dirt. So Frank liked him. And so he plays in this show, and then he also plays on the next show and a couple more. And in the next show, Frank says this is only the second time he's played with us. So this is his first. Don't know about that 24th, but interesting show. Frank, not having Fowler, seems to be doing some. He didn't really seem to like throw any bones to Urso and just kind of said, hey, dive into the deep end and learn to swim. It seems like he's doing a little bit of a solid for Humans here. After Village of the Sun, we don't get a Kid Nazarf. We don't get Don't You Ever Watch That Thing. He doesn't do the To Mercy Dog Meat, Uncle Meat sequence. We get a Cosmic Debris instead of in a Kid Nazarf. We get a Camarillo Brillo. We get some really long jams. All of his guitar solos for Frank are just almost like they're top notch. Like as this tour continues, these solos just continue to get better and better and better. Though we're not really in that typical Summer Fall 74, what in the world are Chester, Tom, and Frank doing during these guitar solos? We're like, we'll just like be going at like 100 miles per hour, then everything seems to fall apart, but purposefully, and then they weirdly put it back together and never regain momentum. And then it's just some of I think the most interesting, at times frustrating, but in a good way, guitar solos, because Frank seems highly experimental. And then Fowler breaks his hand. And instead of just getting this kind of weirdly just, I'm going to indulgently make a left turn and then another left turn and then slam on the brakes, get out of the car and push it type guitar solos, we just get these pedal to the metal. I'm just going to go hard. I'm still going to explore, but I'm like not going to challenge the rhythm section too much. Chester's right there with him the whole time. George is right there with him the whole time. But especially on this show, even maybe more so than the Urso show, Frank really seems to be like sitting in the pocket of Birdlegs, so he can be just more comfortable and say, all right, I can do this. Like, great bass player, but I do think Frank's a little less like stop on a dime and go that way than he would be when Fowler was here. Redunzel might be the best Redunzel solo we've heard so far on this tour. Just an absolutely epic piece of guitar playing that very much feels like a Redunzel solo, but then as it goes on, we get this incredible interplay with Duke, and we just get like him pushing the envelope, but very aggressively, but at the same time still like exploring different venues and like just like this almost endless series of ideas, but he never takes a break between them. The Montana solo is similar, really one of the more organic coming out of the first half of the song into the solo section solos. It's just like whatever that groove was, Frank's like, we're just going to take this, stick with this, I'm going to solo over this. And this Montana solo has less of a funk vibe and more of like a Redunzel type solo vibe. And a lot of these solos, Frank is riffing hard, where all of a sudden we get like he's almost like toying around with like riffs for future songs, but he never slows down the momentum to do it. It's like we're soloing, and all of a sudden he's like dun, 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 for like 8 bars or something before he does something else. Just some exhilarating playing. And as far as James goes on bass, The Urso show is interesting because in the mix that we have for that tape, Mike is really, really high. The bass is super high in the mix. So when he makes a mistake, which he does, you hear it. When he does great things, you hear it. James, the bass on this tape, which is an audience tape, probably like a B plus sound quality. At times the drums are big and echoey. You can hear people talk, like right before the encore. You can hear, I'm assuming it's the taper go, I want more of that. Do you want more of that? To his friend. So you can hear that. But for the most part, it's pretty good sound. The solos sound fantastic. Frank's guitar is super loud in the mix. And everything else is not too muddled. I mean, you can hear the songs. It's not that bad, but maybe average, slightly above average for what we've had over the totality of the tour. But he's not really present in the mix. And he never jumps out in a way where you're like, oh, that didn't work. And when you really do kind of like, just like, hey, like, I'm going to try to hone in on what the bass is playing, it always works. It always sounds good. In Dynamo Hum, particularly in that middle jam, as with Urso, both bass players not being Tom Fowler just gives that a different sort of funky groove to it, which is pretty interesting. But for the most part, he just does really well. Frank throws him a couple bass solos in the George section, or at least one, and he just does a good job. And then he'll stick around for the remainder of the tour, and then go into the studio after the tour goes and record a bunch of songs with Frank. So Frank obviously liked him. Show opens up with Tush Tush Tush. Great Tush Tush Tush. As always, they come out, they do their thing. We go into Stinkfoot. Frank's going hard in Stinkfoot. Like you can tell, he's just ready to play guitar. He's not messing around. The energy is high. At one point, he just kind of like seems to run out of steam, almost like he's doing like he's going to tune his guitar, which he frequently does in these early, in Tush 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 or sometimes in Stinkfoot, but then he rebuilds it back up in a nice little ending. Great opening solo, kind of sets the tone. I think Stinkfoot solos set the tone for a lot of the solos in the show, and this one is aggressive, a little bit of playfulness. Then we end with like a really strong, cohesive finish. Then we get Redunzel, which is just another reason. Like every time I listen to one of these shows, I'm like, oh, this show needs to be officially released. There's a bunch of reasons why this show needs to be officially released, and we'll get to those a little bit in this as we go through the set list. This Redunzel solo might be the best Redunzel solo of the tour. It starts off really gritty, kind of scrappy. Frank's got like a rough, kind of aggressive attitude, and then we just slide into that like fully engaged Redunzel vibe where Frank's just going hard. He can kind of go anywhere he wants, and the band's just going to follow. At one point, he seems to quote something, but I'm not sure what it is, or at least I always like, oh, that's maybe it's not something. Maybe it's just a familiar like grouping of notes. He does this series of just incredible high speed runs where he's just going off, and the band just has to keep up. Like, it is just an absolutely amazing solo, and it's almost like kind of like I'm thinking of like somebody like a skier or a snowboarder, like going down a mountain at high speed and just finding these different grooves that they ride for really short periods. And you know, and they'll be in this groove and they spot another one over there, so they quickly transition into this next groove and stay with that for like 30 seconds or 40 seconds, and they never really slow down, and it's just pedal to the metal the whole time. Absolutely fantastic. Towards the end of the solo, there's some Duke interplay, just absolutely amazing. Like, just has to be one of the best solos of this tour. And then George, of course, during his, absolutely delivers as always. We get some really nice electric piano action into some spacey synth stuff. The bass sounds great in this. I think one of my favorite moments when Fowler is on bass is anytime George is soloing, that George Fowler connection is super strong. Birdlegs is delivering. He's doing a good job. We get a Village of the Sun next with a nice snappy solo. Then Frank's like, we're not going into Echidnas. We're not going into Don't You Ever. I'm not going to do that to you. I might have gone back and listened to the tapes from the Urso shows. Yeah, there's some bad notes in there. So we go into a Cosmic Debris. You know, Frank's like, as they get to the end of Village of the Sun, he's like, all right, wait. Like, it's almost like he's, hey, we're not going into the regular one. We get a Cosmic Debris drop. The Nappy solo, really nice George synthy solo into an electric piano solo. We get an FC, really like kind of bluesy, kind of slowly starts, builds it up to a really nice energy. I've said this before. I think Cosmic Debris and Penguin and Bondage solos are like consistently, you can always rely on them to just deliver the goods. And early on this leg of the tour when Frank was a lot more pushing the boundaries in the Redunzo solos and the Montana solos, and sometimes it didn't work. The Cosmic Debris solos really were this like, you knew you could rely on them and they were frequently highlights. In this show, in which the Stinkfoot solo comes out hard and the Redunzo solo might be one of the best solos of the tour, the Cosmic Debris solo does have not quite the impact it does when Frank's pushing the boundaries otherwise, but it's still a really tasty, good solo. Then he just tears into a Camarillo Brillo. This really feels like a rock and roll section of this show. We get that with a nice George ending. Then we get a Montana. Really interesting vibe going into that solo. It just feels like Frank's like, whatever we're playing in those last vocals, you just stick with that. I'm just going to take off over that. Not going to wait for us to like transition to the solo section. It's not quite as funky. It has almost feels like a Redunzel type solo as far as like what the rhythm section is doing, what Frank is doing. Doesn't quite have that crazy funk that Montana sometimes have that, well, it kind of lost by this tour anyways. We do start maybe getting into little grooves that feel funky after a while as the solo goes on and on. Frank starts dropping some really nice riffs at the end before we go back into the song. But another just absolutely fantastic solo that really Montana from like 73 and most of 74, I think if you took the solo out and like you only heard the solo like on guitar or Shut Up, you would easily go, oh, that's a Montana solo. Like we're at this point, we're like, nah, I'm not sure you could easily identify it from just the solo. We're kind of in a new place as far as what Frank is doing with this. Probably because Fowler's not there, but maybe also because we're at the end of a tour and Frank's just getting experimental even more so. Then we go into an absolutely fantastic George section. It's 20 minutes long. Frank's pretty much not playing Dupree's Paradise at this point. So instead of getting these like a Nappy solo, a bass solo, a Frank solo in Dupree's, we're essentially getting them in what is a 20-minute extended improv with a 200 years old tacked on to the end that is an absolute beast. So in the George thing, we get some like mysterious synth vibes early, and then pretty early on, before George really has a chance to like develop any sort of musical idea, we get some narration talking about Ruth. Frank's doing some conducting pretty early in this to like, you know, the spurts and going through like different music tempos. Duke starts telling the story about Ruth is going to Paris. He asks her if she's going to take Ian. She says no. George wants to go. We get a little storytelling, and then Frank gives Birdlegs a little bit of a bass solo about 4 minutes into this. And then Duke plays some weird synthy stuff. And there's a lot of, like the first 5 to 6 minutes of this really kind of doesn't feel like any sort of typical what we've got so far in these George / Boogerman sections. But then we go into this trippy little funk jam, and George just gets to solo at length. Like he gets a really nice, long, pretty patient little solo that's pretty sweet. It just like, it's like, I feel like this section is, if you've ever seen Frank, like videos of Frank when he conducts the band, like especially I think like the 78 band is a good example of this, where he'll conduct them and then he'll sit down and kind of smoke a cigarette while they jam out, like Tommy Mars and Peter Wolf go at it. It really feels like a lot of this early stuff is like Frank's like, all right, do this. All right, I'm going to sit back and just smoke a cigarette while you guys jam. Wait. And then he gets like restless or bored and he conducts them into something else. But it really feels like he's like turning the stations on a radio and like, oh yeah, do this for a while, guys. George, you take the lead. Absolutely fantastic. Really good stuff. About 10 minutes into this whole section, after George gets a super tasty solo, we get a short little bass solo. We get a short little Nappy solo. Frank's conducting the band while Nappy's playing, and then we kind of bring it way, way down. And at this point, it's really starting to feel like some 60s Mother stuff, where Frank's like, you keep playing. I'm going to conduct everybody else, and we're going to see what kind of, what happens. But Nappy, they just bring it down, and Nappy just kind of chilly, just kind of get like a chill little funk jam with Nappy doing the lead. Very tasty. Nappy starts singing about flies. Velvet Sunrise lyrics get dropped. About 16 minutes into this entire thing, Frank starts playing some stuff on guitar, and then he starts saying, I was sitting in this breakfast nook, and he starts saying the spoken word lyrics that open 200 years old. And then he tells the story of how he wrote it for the bicentennial, but then he also wrote some lyrics, which are the ones Captain Beefheart sings. He's 200 years old, no mean, she gonna be in that part. And he says, I'm gonna sing it, and I don't have music for it, so we're just gonna make it up. So he says those lyrics and just drops a nasty solo. Just a nasty solo, and just goes off for like 5 minutes. At one point, the drums completely drop out, and he's just tearing it up. And then Chester comes back in with some crazy stuff. We're talking like this stuff needs to be released. Like if there is a tape of this, like can we just get a box set of November 1974? I mean, what an epic run. But this is just absolutely amazing. Towards the end of this, Frank starts playing some more riffs and then just absolutely shredding before we like stop completely, get some weird spacey weirdness. And then Frank comes back in with the like, she's 200 years old, so mean, does that part again. And then he just hits the opening chord to Tush, Tush, Tush. And we're off into Tush, Tush, Tush. And the main set is ending. The George section into 200 years old, which takes like, I think like 25, maybe closer to 30 minutes for the whole thing. Completely indulgent. Frank is just like doing whatever he wants on stage, reciting lyrics to songs he hasn't even recorded yet. He just wrote, just tearing off guitar solos at whim, stopping the band at whim. Like if you like Frank's guitar playing and you just don't care what the context is, this is an absolutely epic, epic show. For the encore, we get a Dynamo Hum. And at the end of the Dynamo Hum, we get a typical Dynamo Hum, you know, the band. We get the little audience participation in the middle. Sounds really good. When they get to the groove in the middle, U-Man's bass sounds really great. U-Man's, no idea how to pronounce his name. And then we get a closing solo. Frank drops a closing solo on Dynamo Hum that should be in every single Dynamo Hum ever. It is fantastic. Yeah. What else to say about this? It is really, really good. Yeah, I think that's all the notes I put down for this. It's a fantastic show. Like the Redunzel solo might be the best Redunzel solo of the tour. Montana, up there. Like it's up there. Maybe top 10 of the tour. Just absolutely fantastic. The whole 200 years old thing, absolutely fantastic. Like this is incredible stuff. And James does a good job. Birdlegs, you kind of bring it. Where would I rank this among all the others from 1974? I have it. Oh, I had my list up, but now it's gone. I think I have it at number 5, which, considering everything I just said and how much I praise the show and how I might have the best solo of the tour, that just shows you how good those 4 above it are. This is a fantastic tour. This is why this is my favorite tour. Like it gets incredibly better as it goes on, and yet it's incredibly good early on. It's crazy stuff, people. Some of these shows, they're ranked there because the tape quality we have is like, you know, this is also a ranking of not just the shows, but like some of these are like we have 30 minutes of a show or like half the songs are cut. So I don't have the details of that, but that's why some of those are ranked down on the bottom. But I'm sure if we had complete shows officially released, whatever's available, they would all sound fantastic. But yeah, that's all I got. Thanks for tolerating the eye. Don't know how it looks. But yeah, all right. We got a couple more shows with James, a New Year show. Well, that'll wrap up our 74 coverage. And then we're going to move on to a short little tour, probably in like a month. And then after that, I'm not really sure what I'm going to tackle, but we'll see. We'll see. We're going to save 82 for a while, people. 82 is kind of epic, like 74. So I'm going to do a couple like maybe lesser covered ones before we get to the awesomeness that is 82. But anyways, thoughts on this show, things I messed up, you know how this works. Leave a comment, subscribe, like, share, all that stuff. Thanks for your time. Peace. Talk to you later.